Hi, y'all. My name is Marissa. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am one of two of our Gender Buffet interns. We're super excited to be doing this virtually, and basically just to summarize what we do here for the Gender Buffet is we have a presentation, and it'll be an informal dialogue between Carmen and I, and we'll show you a lot of content. And this week's theme is Black Lives Matter. So, Carmen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. How about we go into this slide where we have these cute pictures of us? You can go
All
ahead,
right.
Marissa.
Okay, so as I said, my name is Marissa. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm not a fourth year anymore. I actually just graduated in the springtime. I was in Muir College. My major was physiology and neuroscience, and I minored in human development, and I'm from Santa Clarita, California.
And hi, everyone. My name is Carmen. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am also no longer a third year. I'm now, I guess, technically a fourth year. I'm from ERC. I'm an environmental policy major, and I'm from the Bay Area. And that's for later.
Yeah, just to start us off, if y'all aren't familiar with the Women's Center, we'll just go over the FACES guiding principles that we have here. So F is for feminism. So in order for us to end sexism, we have to work to end all types of oppression. For A, we have awareness. Just by having these types of conversations, we're bringing awareness to issues that aren't usually talked about, that may have stigmas, etc. C for community. Normally, we would be having an in-person community at the center in our space, but now we're working to have a virtual community with you all, having these interactive discussions and so forth. E for empowerment, just trying to bring power back to those groups who are typically marginalized by having these discussions and talking about ways in which we can improve. And S for social justice, kind of just combining all of these ideas into one thing, such as like activism.
And if you decide to join us for our live discussions, I would be going over the community guidelines, but for now, you can just admire them from a distance. And just the disclaimer, we do want to say that, during this discussion, neither Marissa and I are Black. We are not trying to say that we understand the Black experience in the US. We're just trying to hold an informative discussion and dialogue. And also, we want to warn our audience that there is mention of police violence. So I have here, what is the Black Lives Matter movement? So they actually have a website. I recommend you all check it out. I won't go to it right now because I have to go to a different window and that's a lot. But I recommend that you check out the website. It's just www.blacklivesmatter.com, and they have a lot of excellent information. And they are, as you can see by the link name here, they're going 6 years strong. And so I highly recommend you go visit the website. But here, this is actually from the website. They have a list of their co-founders, one of whom is Patrice Kahn-Coolers. And I can go over the little blurb here of her is Patrice Kahn-Coolers is an artist, organizer, and freedom fighter from Los Angeles, California, co-founder of Black Lives Matter, and founder of Dignity and Power. Now she is a New York Times bestselling author, Fulbright scholar, popular public speaker, and Sydney Prize awardee, Peace Prize awardee. Patrice recently toured her multimedia performance art piece, Power from the Mouths of the Occupied, a gripping performance piece highlighting the impact of mass criminalization and state violence in Black communities across the United States. And then we have two more co-founders who I'll go over here. The other one is Alicia Garza. Alicia Garza is an Oakland-based organizer, writer, public speaker, freedom dreamer who is currently the Special Projects Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the nation's leading voice for dignity and fairness for the millions of domestic workers in the United States. Garza, along with Opal Tometi and Patrice Kahn-Coolers, also co-founded Black Lives Matter, a globally recognized organizing project that focuses on combating anti-Black state-sanctioned violence and the oppression of all Black people. And our final co-founder is Opal Tometi. Opal Tometi is a New York-based Nigerian-American writer, strategist, and community organizer. Opal is a co-founder of #Black Lives Matter. The historic political project was launched in the wake of murder of Trayvon Martin to explicitly combat implicit bias and anti-Black racism and to protect and affirm the beauty and dignity of all Black lives. Opal is credited with creating the online platforms and initiating the social media strategy during the project's early days. The campaign has grown into a national network of approximately 40 chapters. And I think, it's really important to include the co-founders, because oftentimes when I hear Black Lives Matters mentioned, often the co-founders aren't mentioned with it. And I think it's also really cool that they're not only Black women, but they come from all these varying backgrounds. Marissa, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just sorry. I just wanted to ask you a question, actually, if you wouldn't mind. Just going on to some of the discussion questions that we do have next. If you want to bring that slide up, maybe we can go over one of them. I just wanted to see like your perspective of how you see Black Lives Matter like portrayed in the media. Like it could either be like on Instagram or possibly like TV outlets. Like what is your thoughts and opinions on how it's portrayed in media?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think it really depends on the media source that you look at. A lot of the stuff I have seen or that I've paid attention to the most about Black Lives Matter is stuff from Twitter and Instagram. And I think maybe some people find this controversial, but I think that those sources of media can actually be some of the most accurate, because from what I've seen on there versus what has been portrayed on more, I guess, like national news networks. National news networks seem to be portraying a lot of the protesters as violent, as rioters who like just are doing this protest solely to break into buildings and steal things from stores. While on Twitter and Instagram, you actually see a lot of peaceful protesters. You do see people who are rioting, but you actually do see a lot of protesters who are also trying to prevent some people from rioting and breaking into buildings. So yeah, that's my experience. What about you, Marissa?
Yeah, I definitely found something similar to that. And for me, I think Instagram has been my biggest source, and I've been trying to be as careful with that as possible, because obviously with any social media there is the possibility of getting false information, but I try to follow leaders of the movement, to get accurate information, and to also like check people's sources. I think that's also a very good thing to do with any topic, really, is to check people's sources, see where that information came from, like is it credible, asking all of those questions. So I think for me, Instagram and like seeing those infographics, I think have been like really great, and then I'll like look at the resources that they use to like look at the websites, and usually they are very credible. So for me, I just think it's important for us to all like check the facts and make sure that we are looking at every outlet to see what is accurate and what is not accurate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I forget, at the end of this presentation, do we have listed like good sources or like people to follow for accurate
Yeah.
information? Yeah, okay, awesome. So, stick to the end of this video, or I guess fast forward since this is a recording if you want to see the people we have listed, but that'll be towards the end of the presentation. Do you have any last comments, Marissa?
No, I think we're good. We can move on. And just a reminder that these discussion questions will be the ones we are discussing on this next Friday. We'll be having that in person. And if y'all would like to take a picture of this to kind of have a preview, like that's totally fine as well.
So I I guess I can show like a part of this. I don't think it's very long, but this is kind of a preview. Actually, no, this is the full feature. Oh, I'm not going to show the full feature. That's a lot. But just to let you all know, there is 13th on Netflix. It's this really amazing documentary on the 13th Amendment, and also the prison system in the US. It's extremely informative, and it can be a lot to handle. So I guess kind of take that into account when you're watching it. It can be a lot. I've watched it twice now, and each time it has really affected me deeply. But it's on Netflix and also on YouTube for free, I'm pretty sure, which is why this says full feature. So you can see the full movie for free on YouTube. And then here is a cool graphic. This is actually created, I think, in inspiration, based on the documentary 13th, it says up above. So it says the United States holds only 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners, which I think says a lot. I mean, we hold a quarter of the world's prisoners. Do you have any initial comments on this graphic, Marissa? Anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of absurd to have that much a percentage of the world's prisoners. It kind of like makes you think why it is that way, how our system is different from other countries. Sometimes, like for me, I'm thinking like, what are these crimes? And then also, I think it mentions like how it disproportionately like affects Black people in particular. I honestly can't really read much of the stuff on the graphic, but that's kind of like what I'm
Yeah,
going
sorry
off of.
about that.
I'm sure hopefully on your screens you can see it a little bit better. But yeah, it just makes me like wonder like how we got to this point and what our system is doing wrong to, to have this type of system.
Yeah, and in the documentary 13th, it goes into a lot about the history of slavery and how that plays into our current prison system. And I guess one thing I would like to point out about this graphic in particular is that here it says the lifetime likelihood of imprisonment of white men is 1 in 17, if I counted the heads correctly, while the lifetime likelihood of imprisonment for Black men is 1 in 3. Which is quite drastic. And then also Black men only account for 6.5% of the population, but 40.2% of the US prison population. So that's pretty drastic. But I'll go on to the next slide. And here we have, I won't show the full video of this, but this is about Kimberly Crenshaw. She coined the term intersectionality, which we are big fans of here at the Women's Center. And I included this on purpose directly after that graphic, because a lot of times it seems like when the conversation about incarceration comes up, it's focused mostly on Black men. But Black women, are just as prone to police violence, as we have seen, for example, with like Breonna Taylor. And so Kimberly Crenshaw talks about how, our different identities, these different systems of oppression, can intersect, such as sexism and racism with Black women. Do you have any comments there, Marissa?
Sorry, I was taking a drink of water. But yes, I think at the Women's Center especially, we have tried to frame our work around this term intersectionality. And I think it's even important, like looking back on the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, thinking that they're Black women and they're Black and they're also women. So kind of combining these identities and seeing where they cross at, and you can see when she explains it kind of the analogy she uses, which I think is really important, and it's really helped me remember kind of like what intersectionality means and how it plays into all these different issues.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I totally agree. And if anyone would like to watch, even during our live discussion, we won't be watching the entirety of this, of Kimberly Crenshaw's TED Talk, but if anyone is interested in watching it, I'm pretty sure you can just Google or just go to YouTube, Kimberly Crenshaw TED Talk, and you should see this thumbnail, and then that's probably the video that we have linked there. So I know we talked briefly about this already, well, maybe a little bit more than briefly, about intersectionality and Kimberly Crenshaw. But I guess, Marissa, I want to ask you, how can intersectionality strengthen movements?
Yeah, I think intersectionality plays a huge part in making sure every person's identity is seen within these movements. So, addressing several different issues. So, for example, if being like for myself, my personal experience, just being like from a Latin descent and then also being a woman, there are several different parts of my identity within that and kind of addressing those issues. And you see that in many different communities too. So just trying to see like, okay, what does it mean to be of like a Latin descent? Like, what are like typical stereotypes that are involved with that, and how do we destigmatize that? And then at the same time, how is it being a woman in the United States? Like, what kind of stereotypes go around that, and how can we destigmatize that and work around that and have these movements be central to several people's perspectives and several people's identities? So I think that's really important, and it just addresses kind of like an overall arc of these people and what they're going through. As opposed to not having something that's intersectional, then you're like missing pieces. And it's hard for you to address issues without having all the pieces to the puzzle, I would say. But yeah, that's kind of like my viewpoints are. It's kind of vague, but I hope you'll like understand kind of the basic concept of it. And like we said, go ahead and watch the video. I feel like Kimberly Crenshaw do a great job explaining that and giving examples. But yeah, what about you, Carmen? What do you think how intersectionality would play a role into these movements?
Yeah, I wanted to bounce off of what you had said in terms of your own identity, because I know that we both identify uh, as Latinas, and also specifically as Mexican. But even, even though we both identify as that, even between us, we have kind of differences in our identities. Like, for example, like being mixed race is a really large part of my identity. I don't know if it is for you, but like one of my parents is white, one of my parents is, you know, an immigrant from Mexico. And I think, like even those little differences between like, kind of different, even within identities, is really important to consider. Or even, like for example, like my experience as a Latina, like in the Bay Area growing up, is probably different than you being a Latina, in Santa Clarita growing up. So I think, those differences also need to be accounted for. And, I think while some people may think that accounting for all those differences can be tedious, I really think that they can strengthen a movement. I think just especially, looking at kind of like feminist movements in the 70s, there was a big kind of push for, like, oh, all women of like, any like race or ethnicity, like all have the same struggles, when that wasn't the case. And in fact, it just excluded more women instead of pushing, kind of like pushing women's rights further, and really excluded specifically women of color. So I think considering that, intersectionality is absolutely crucial, and the more inclusive we can be, the stronger that we can be.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said, Carmen. I think those were great points that you mentioned. for me, I'm really interested in women's health, and we kind of had like a racism in medicine talk last week. And I kind of found that intersectionality was super important just within medicine, just seeing the different rates, for instance, for like mortality rates in Black women compared to white women, how disproportionately the mortality rates are in Black women that do give birth. So just things like that we kind of have to consider, and like you said before, like where people grow up, who their family is, their culture, all those good things that go into intersectionality. So I think all those points kind of contribute to why it's so important.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm gonna go on to the next slide. All right, and so you want me to show this video, correct, Marissa?
Yes.
Okay, I will go ahead.
I didn't discover why I wrote really until later. At the very beginning, when I wrote the first book, The Bluest Eye, I came at it as not a writer but a reader, and such a story didn't exist. Every little homely Black girl was a joke or didn't exist in literature, and I was eager to read about a story where racism really hurts and can destroy you.
You don't think you will ever change and write books that incorporate white lives into them substantially?
I have done.
In a substantial way?
You can't understand how powerfully racist that question is, can you? Because you could never ask a white author, when are you going to write about Black people?
Toni Morrison's prose brings us that kind of moral and emotional intensity that few writers ever attempt. From Song of Solomon to Beloved, Toni reaches us deeply using a tone that is lyrical, precise, distinct, and inclusive.
There would never have been a book club had there not been you as an author.
Really?
No. So I thank you, Ms. Morrison.
This
I thank
is fabulous.
you. Yes. Never would have been one without you. Yes. Never would have been.
Well, you know, I'm trying not to write just because I can, or just write more. I'm trying to write less that means more, that says more. For me, it's extremely important for the clarification not only of the past, but of who we are as human beings in this country.
God has said you home.
I was editing a book at Random House, and it was a kind of scrapbook of all sorts of things that emanated from African American culture. And I came across this woman, Margaret Garner, and the story was that a slave woman had killed her children, or tried to kill them all. What struck me was the theme was that she was not crazy. And they were stunned to find her A, articulate, B, sane, and 3, interested in doing it again. I know how to write forever. I don't think I could have happily stayed here with the calamity that has occurred so often in the world if I did not have a way of thinking about it, past, present, future, which is what writing is for me. It's control. Nobody tells me what to do. I am in control. It is my world. It's sometimes wild, the process by which I arrive at something. But nevertheless, it's mine, it's free, and it's a way of thinking. It's pure knowledge.
You know, I loved Toni Morrison before, and I think I love her a lot more now. I read Beloved. I had to read it in English class. It scared me a little because of some of the supernatural aspects, but yeah, I totally get what she means when she was talking about during the video. Okay, we have Audre Lorde. Sorry, what was that, Marissa?
This one's a poem that she wrote. So I'll just do a little background about her before we get into the poem. So she is a self-described Black lesbian mother, warrior, and poet. She dedicated her life and her creative talent to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. And yeah, kind of just going back on that idea of intersectionality, a lot of these authors and people who are part of this movement or past movement, they were definitely, you know, aware of intersectionality and trying their best to incorporate that into their works.
Yeah, so should I go ahead and play it?
Yes.
There is no hierarchy of oppressions, by Audre Lorde. I was born Black and a woman. I am trying to become the strongest person I can become, to live the life I have been given, and to help effect change toward a livable future for this earth and for my children. As a Black, lesbian, feminist, socialist, poet, mother of 2, including 1 boy and member of an interracial couple, I usually find myself part of some group in which the majority defines me as deviant, difficult, inferior, or just plain wrong. From my membership in all of these groups, I have learned that oppression and the intolerance of difference come in all shapes and sizes and colors and sexualities, and that among those of us who share the goals of liberation and a workable future for our children, there can be no hierarchies of oppression. I have learned that sexism, a belief in the inherent superiority of one sex over all others and thereby its right to dominance, and heterosexism, a belief in the inherent superiority of one pattern of loving over all others and thereby its right to dominance, both arise from the same source as racism, a belief in the inherent superiority of one race over all others and thereby its right to dominance. Oh, says a voice from the Black community, but being Black is normal. Well, I and many Black people of my age can remember grimly the days when it didn't used to be. I simply do not believe that one aspect of myself can possibly profit from the oppression of another part of my identity. I know that my people cannot possibly profit from the oppression of any other group which seeks the right to peaceful existence. Rather, we diminish ourselves by denying to others what we have shed blood to obtain for our children. And those children need to learn that they do not have to become like each other in order to work together for a future they will all share. The increasing attacks upon lesbians and gay men are only an introduction to the increasing attacks upon all Black people. For wherever oppression manifests itself in this country, Black people are potential victims. And it is a standard of right-wing cynicism to encourage members of oppressed groups to act against each other. And so long as we are divided because of our particular identities, we cannot join together in effective political action. Within the lesbian community, I am Black, and within the Black community, I am a lesbian. Any attack against Black people is a lesbian and gay issue, because I and thousands of other Black women are part of the lesbian community. Any attack against lesbians and gays is a Black issue, because thousands of lesbians and gay men are Black. There is no hierarchy of oppression. It is not accidental that the Family Protection Act, which is virulently anti-woman and anti-Black, is also anti-gay. As a Black person, I know who my enemies are, and when the Ku Klux Klan goes to court in Detroit to try and force the Board of Education to remove books the Klan believes hint at homosexuality, then I know I cannot afford the luxury of fighting one form of oppression only. I cannot afford to believe that freedom from intolerance is the right of only one particular group, and I cannot afford to choose between the fronts upon which I must battle these forces of discrimination wherever they appear to destroy me. And when they appear to destroy me, it will not be long before they appear to destroy you.
Yay. That was so beautiful. I
Yeah.
just love how she touches upon everything. She explains it so well. It's amazing. So I highly recommend y'all check out more of her works.
Yeah, just the one word that came to mind after I listened to that was just damn. Just, like, I mean, yeah, and I agree with everything you said. It's very, very powerful. Yeah. All right, and then we have
Angela Davis.
our homegirl Angela Davis, who
Yep.
is the alum.
I know. I can't believe, I don't know if anyone else knew this, but I had to Google her and look up some information about her, and she went to UCSD. I don't know why nobody told me this, but she went there for her master's, I think, for only about a year, so maybe that's why, but it seems very important. I don't know why this wasn't plastered everywhere at UCSD.
I mean, we kind of know why, though.
I mean, we know why, but that's not the point. But why? Anyways, I think you could play the first one that's just talking about her. The second video, you can Google Angela Davis, and I believe it's her current perspective on the pandemic. I had found that through a thread of YouTube videos, but it's a very interesting video. That one is a little bit longer, so I don't think we'll have time to play it, but it kind of shows how she's connecting the movement in the 60s, kind of the current movement right now. Very interesting, but we'll go ahead and watch that first video when it gives more information about Angela Davis.
Who is Angela Davis?
Angela Davis is a human rights activist, a scholar, and an author. She came to prominence in the late 60s and early 70s during the Black Power era. During that time, she became involved with the prison movement because she was accused of complicity in a murder that took place. And she spent 16 months in jail. And she was already concerned about the conditions of prisoners, but as she came to know the prisoners and what it was actually like to be a prisoner herself, she gained a lot more interest and passion for that movement.
The Free Angela button is on display at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. What does the button say?
The button, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, that button represents the movement that rose when she was in prison. So that's one of the reasons that she was ultimately acquitted, because this huge movement took place not just in the United States, but internationally. And those buttons were worn by people, and there were protests taking place all over the place, including outside of her prison.
Everyone knows those basic facts, the I Believe speech from Martin Luther King, but no one hears about the women in history.
It's one of the reasons that I'm so interested in African American culture and history now in my life and in the work that I do now. Why are you interested in this subject?
Well, I feel like it's really important to learn about American history and also African American history because, I'm a minority, I'm Black. I should be aware of these things culturally, and also you can't grow from any of these experiences without learning from what has happened in the past.
The idea of a political prisoner in the 70s came to mean literally anyone who was incarcerated, especially a person of color, because the idea is that the system itself is oppressive. Even though you yourself may not have been an actual activist, if you are arrested like George Jackson was because you're poor and Black and end up spending the rest of your life in prison, then you're a political prisoner.
So they were kind of targeting the whole justice system. Once you start solving one problem, it starts like a domino domino effect. We solve like equal rights in women's, maybe we can solve minority rights because we've already come together as women of all color. Like it kind of like backpedals on each other.
And if you look at the civil rights movement that was initially focused on segregation or ending legal segregation and voting rights, that branched out into women's movements and other ethnic movements as well. So ultimately other people benefited from the civil rights movement.
Yay. I really like that video because it kind of like showed the dynamic between like this generation and like the older generation, kind of like having a discussion around this while also talking about Angela Davis. So I thought it was a really interesting perspective to have, and I really appreciated the dialogue going back and forth between them. But yeah, you can learn more about Angela Davis, obviously just Googling her, looking up YouTube videos. She has a lot of powerful speeches and books that she's written, most notably for her criticism on the prison system. I think that's one of the things that she's really passionate about. So yeah, if y'all would like to go check that out, go ahead and look her up and learn more about her. And this one is on MJ Rodriguez. I'm not sure how long this video is, Carmen. If you want to check, it might be like 3 or 4 minutes long. If it's too long, then I can just
4:35.
That's like 4 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I think we have time to play it. We'll be good.
Yeah. Okay.
Promoting light, love, hope, inspiration. How could you be mad at that? As a little girl, because I never really saw myself as a boy, I was always a rambunctious kid, but there were moments where kids started coming up with words like different and weird. As a person who identified as female, it was hard, but I also noticed that I had something that I could give, which was my craft.
Tomorrow for me.
At 14 years old, me and my dad went to go see the movie, and I told him, that's me. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I want to play her. He said, in due time, in due time. It was validating to hear my father say in due time. I knew that meant you can do anything you want to do, and you can let people know who you are whenever you want to let them know. I vogued at my high school and I vogued in New York City. It felt great to be in that environment and be around people who were just like me and who had something to offer. It didn't matter about race, color, orientation, gender, anything. It was a space of comfort and welcoming. Stage as Angel Dumas Chouinard, it felt empowering, and that was the start of me not being closed off to giving who I was and letting people see the true spirit and individual that was there.
It was my lucky day today on Avenue A when a lady in a limousine, she drove my way. She said,
Honey, I gave my whole life on that stage, but then I had to leave her on the stage and then come out and conjure this other being that I wasn't. At moments, it was so disheartening. And then time went on where I was like, I gotta do what I gotta do for me. I'm a regular schmegular old girl who just loves to do what she loves to do and wants to be extravagant and big in it. I had been hearing from my sisters, girl, there's a show coming out. It's called Pose. You need to go in for it. And I went in for an on-tape audition the very next day. Child, I went in there and I served. Was to change what people saw when it came to individuals of the LGBT community. And what way to break that down than to do it in a show where it's broadcasting marginalized individuals from all aspects of life. I feel like we're transcending these stereotypical narratives. We're finally just being seen as human beings. So we need to constantly get out there and speak, march, go into places that you never thought you were going to, take up space. You deserve it. Why not?
Oh my gosh. I just love MJ Rodriguez.
I love her so much. And I put myself on mute, so I'm like not 100% sure if you could have seen my face, but I was just like, yes, like the whole time she was talking. But yeah, if y'all haven't watched Pose yet, it's on Netflix, the first 2 seasons, I believe. Please watch it. You will have a great time and you'll just enjoy your life when you're watching that show. I think it's from FX on TV, but obviously nobody's filming right now that I know. But yeah, it's such a great show, and like she was saying, great like representation. And yeah, do you have any other thoughts about MJ, Carmen?
I just love her. Like, I may be in love with her, who knows? But I certainly love her. And yeah, watch Pose. I recommend that show to everyone I meet. Please watch Pose. It's so amazing. They also came out with the 2nd season somewhat recently. So check it out.
Yes. Or just, binge watch it for 2 days. Like,
Yeah.
that's totally what I did.
That's
but
what
anyways,
I did too.
Yeah.
Well, kinda. Took a break in between. But I don't know how we're doing for time, Marissa. I don't know if we want to talk about these questions.
Yeah, I think we're good. Maybe we can just talk about one of these questions and then go on to the rest of the presentation. So Carmen, do you find any commonalities among these activists? Do you think that, they have similar beliefs, or are they different? Like, what is your perspective?
I mean, I think one kind of pattern I feel like I saw between all of them was just kind of like inclusivity, and kind of remembering that like a community of people has even all kinds of people within it, which really drives home kind of the necessity for intersectionality. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely see that as well. They all have that passion to lead like with intersectionality in mind. And I think it's so powerful that though they might all come from different backgrounds, with different identities, that they all have a very similar vision in what they're like aiming to do with whatever form of work they have, whether it was Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison with their writing and their novels and poems, or if it was like MJ Rodriguez, like her being on the screen and being that idea and that face of representation. So I just think their ideas were very similar, but I really appreciate how all their presentations were a little bit different, but all having the same goal.
Yeah, no, those videos were really great. So thank you for finding those, Marissa.
Yeah, of course.
All right, are you ready to go on to the next slide?
Yes. All right, so this TED Talk is a little bit long. I think it's like 15 minutes, so I'll just give like a brief summary of what D.L. Stewart was talking about in this video. So he is a Black trans man, and he is discussing the issue of Black trans lives matter. So he kind of, also just a disclaimer, he does briefly mention something about sexual assault within the video, so I advise you to be aware of that. But yeah, he talks about his experience as a Black trans man, what that means to him, and just the different societal struggles that he has faced with intersectionality as well, just being Black, and then also at transitioning into a male. So just like that process and how different people in his life saw him and had these internalized stigmas of trans people. So he goes more in depth about that in his experience. And one of the quotes that he says towards the end of the TED Talk that really stuck with me is, "Your liberation is bound with mine." So I thought that was a super powerful thing for him to say, just going off of intersectionality again. I know we're really repetitive with this, but I feel like it's super important when talking about this. But just that if you do not fit the typical mold for what society deems as the dominant identity, then everyone has very similar struggles, whether it has to do with sexism, with racism, with homophobia. He explains that they all come from the same place, and it's very important to recognize that, and that we are all going through very similar struggles, though not exactly the same, but very similar, and that all of our liberations are bound to each other, very integrated. So I just thought that was a very interesting point that he brought up, and very important for us to all kind of recognize that, so we're not turning against each other for any reason, because we are all having these struggles out here. But yeah, that was basically a summary. He obviously goes more into detail, so if you want to check out this TED Talk, just Google Black Trans Lives Matter TED Talk, and that's how I found this video. Very informative, and I highly recommend it. Yeah, and just one more activist that we would like to mention is Marsha P. Johnson. She is a Black transgender woman, an activist. She was a prominent figure in the Stonewall riots against oppressive policing, and she found one of the country's first safe spaces for transgender and homeless youth. She advocated tirelessly on behalf of sex workers, prisoners, and people with HIV. And just another disclaimer, do not watch the Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson on Netflix. That is Stolen Work. And we advise you to watch Happy Birthday, Marsha on Amazon Prime. That documentary on Marsha is done by another Black trans woman, I believe. So that one is the one that we suggest you watch if you would like to learn more about Marsha P. Johnson. Yeah, just quickly touching upon the Stonewall riots of 1969. It was a law that was used to raid bars, similar to Stonewall. So this is kind of like a background to the riots. So there was a law that was in place to raid bars, similar to bars like Stonewall, which made it illegal for someone to be wearing clothing that belonged to the opposite gender. So this kind of shows how the raids at Stonewall and policing of gender coincided together. So it's a very important connection to make between the trans community and with police brutality. So kind of just a brief summary of the riots that occurred. So when the police raided the Stonewall Inn, which was a popular gay bar in Greenwich Village in New York City, the street erupted into violent protests that lasted for the next 6 days. The Stonewall riots, as they came to be known, marked a major turning point in the modern gay civil rights movement in the United States and around the world. And the police brutality within the LGBTQ+ community, especially against Black trans women, was very apparent in these riots. But yeah, it's kind of just the brief summary version of what happened. And I think it connects very well to what's going on now, because we do see higher rates of Black trans women being brutalized by police. So I think that's very important to mention, even, I don't know, like 50 years later, how this is still happening. But there's more information on the Stonewall Uprising documentary that's on PBS if you would like to learn more about it. All right, and we'll just go ahead and maybe ask one of these questions. So, Carmen.
I feel like I'm in interrogation right now. I feel like it always begins with you. Oh, Carmen.
Like, yes, Carmen. You have to answer this question, and you have to be 100% correct. So, how do you think that the LGBTQ plus community fits into the Black Lives Matter movement?
It's kind of a hefty question. I mean, like, I think on one hand it's like simple, and on one hand it's complicated. I mean, kind of like simply put, I forget which one of the activists said it in one of those videos, but you know, like, there are people who are Black who are also part of the LGBTQ plus community, and you know, when people from the LGBTQ plus community are attacked or like are discriminated against, like that is a Black Lives Matter movement, because that encompasses Black people. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it, but those are my thoughts. What about you, Marissa?
Yeah, I think the activist you're thinking about was Audre Lorde. I think that was in her poem. She's talking about that. But yeah, I agree with what you said. Just again, that idea of intersectionality. So if you're Black and you are queer, then that is automatically a Black Lives Matter movement type of issue that you need to address and that you need to include within the policies that you wish to make and all that stuff. But I think going off of the last question that we have, like, how can we ensure that our activism and education includes Black trans people? I think it's really important for us, especially in this day and age of like social media, to follow different Black and trans activists and Black and trans people, support their businesses, try to go out of our way to include them in our daily practices, in our shopping, things like that. What TV shows we watch, for example, like watching Pose, I feel like it's a good way, even through like the media just being like engaged, and they definitely have great lessons to be learned within these forms of media. And then just like in our presentation, just trying to include those people and their perspectives as if it's like readily available. So having that video on MJ Rodriguez, for example, like we're hearing her experience and her story. I think that's very important for us to do that and for us to listen, especially with videos and with works that are already available to us.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, my response would just be repeat what you said. I think you said it very well.
Right. And I think that is all that we have. We have these resources that we were talking about earlier. So if y'all would like to take a screenshot of this or do what you like with this information, these are just a couple of resources that I had found, different books that you can read. I like how I put any books from Bell Hooks. Love her. She is amazing. Currently still reading All About Love. I haven't finished reading it.
I'm still reading it too. Although I'm like 70% of the way through. I think that's what my Kindle says.
Yeah, I'm like on chapter 4, but it's okay. Getting through it. It is great. I'm not much of a reader, but I will.
I'm proud of you, Marissa. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
But yeah, so we have books, we have apps in which you can engage with Black-owned businesses, places to donate. And on the next slide, I believe we have people to follow. So yeah, so these are people to follow on social media. I just think these are really great people to to see the real Cami Crawford. Love her so much. I don't know if y'all have seen Catfish, but the new season just started last week, so I've been watching that every Wednesday at 8 p.m. I'm not trying to advertise that, but I just love her.
I'm trying not to advertise it, she says, as she gives it a huge plug.
But she's amazing. I just love how real she is. She's just like unapologetically herself, and I know through this whole movement, she's been doing her best to share her experiences and give educational resources and things like that. So I believe it's possible for you to be a media influencer and also have that type of impact as well. But yeah, that's basically all that we have for today. Carmen, any last words before we
These are
close
not
off?
relevant anymore.
They're not. Okay.
I mean, I guess thank you for everyone who has been watching. It feels kind of like strange to say that right now because like it's being recorded, so technically right now no one's watching. But thank you for everyone who's been watching this, the recorded version of this.
We're YouTubers now, so
yeah, I
I'll
know,
just
right?
like subscribe.
We started it off. We should have been like, hey everyone, and like remember to subscribe. I don't even know.
Remember to follow us on social media.
Yeah.
UPSD WC, I think that's our @ Make sure you tune into our program.
You should know this better. But yeah, no, thank you everyone for watching this. I mean, leave comments down below. That sounds so YouTuber. I am so sorry. I just don't.
If you have any questions, comments, please. Thank you for watching. We hope that you come to our discussion, and we promise me and Carmen will be this awkward together. This is just how we are. So hope y'all will tune in for that. And yeah, it'll be a good time.